Hello and welcome back to Underdog Investing. So, I'm sure most of you are aware that the genomic stocks are currently skyrocketing, and I just wanted to find out a bit more information as to why this is. So, I came across a white paper by ARK called the Genomics Innovation and Catalyst for Growth, and I found it quite helpful in allowing me to understand some of the reasons why. And I just wanted to share with you some of the key points. So that's what I've done in this video, basically. And I'll be very grateful if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel. So I just want to start with the potential impact on the listed equity markets. So this is what ARK Invest believe. They believe that by 2024, genomics should generate hundreds of billions of dollars in new revenue and trillions of dollars in new market capitalizations as we transition to the genomic age. So they feel that the genomic revolution could lead to more effective and efficient healthcare, longer lives, fewer surgeries, and dramatic value creation. So as you can see from this graph, this is basically a graph which shows the returns in terms of financially on drug research and development. And as you can see, in the 1980s, you can see that the returns were going upwards. There was an upward trajectory due to the biotech revolution. But then in the 2000s, you can see that there was a decline. And this was due to lack of disruptive innovation. And ARK Invest believe that in the 2020s, we're going to see a lot of disruptive innovation in the genomics sector, which will cause a potential exponential growth in terms of returns. And the purple lines are what they predict will likely happen. Okay. Now, moving on to the technological platforms which are going to allow this exponential growth in the genomics sector, I'm going to go through the four main ones that ARK Invest believe are going to transform genomics. Starting with the first one, next generation DNA sequencing. So in 2003, the Human Genome Project was completed. And basically what the Human Genome Project is, so a genome is just the building blocks of an organism. And every organism has different building blocks. And each human also has different building blocks. And so the Human Genome Project was basically a bunch of scientists who got together and decided to figure out all the building blocks of a human. And they managed to complete that in 2003. But it took them over a decade, and it took them $2.7 billion. Now, what's really exciting is the fact that less than 2 decades later, we're now able to sequence the human genome, which basically means we're able to read the building blocks of a human, and we're able to do that for less than $600. And what's interesting is that ARK Invest feel that we are likely to be able to do that for less than $100 in the next 5 years. So that doesn't sound like a significant difference between $600 to $100. But if we think about it, from $2.7 billion to $600, that's about 4.5 million times cheaper. But from $2.7 billion to $100, that's about 27 million times cheaper. So it is very significant. If we have a look at this graph, so what ARK Invest believe is that, well, let's start with what currently is the case. So in 2019, 2.6 million genomes were sequenced. And ARK Invest believe that because sequencing genomes is getting cheaper and cheaper, this is going to drive mass adoption. And they feel that in only 5 years' time, we're going to get a 40 times increase in the number of genomes sequenced. So it's going to go from 2.6 million to 105 million by 2024. And it doesn't look significant in this graph because this graph is actually a log scale. So if it was a normal graph, we would see a very exponential growth. Now, let's just go through some of the potential applications of next generation sequencing. So scientists have discovered that tumors, which are cancers, shed fragments of mutated DNA. So basically, tumors or cancers, they shed little fragments of abnormal building blocks into the bloodstream. And these can be identified by liquid biopsies. And biopsies are basically taking a small piece of the body in order to investigate it. And what's really interesting is next generation sequencing has allowed us to be able to identify abnormalities using in a non-invasive way or very minimally invasive way, such as blood tests, compared to previously where we usually have to take a small piece of flesh to investigate that. Now, this has many benefits, and if we have a look at the bottom three boxes, you can see, firstly, we can help diagnose patients. So we can target undiagnosed patients. And because it's so readily available and easy to do, we can actually potentially identify cancer patients much earlier on. And if we're able to do that, we can significantly reduce the mortality rate. The second group of patients we can target are patients who are already diagnosed with conditions such as cancers. If we're able to clearly read the building blocks of the cancer, then we can actually tailor specific treatments to each individual patient. That would, number one, save a lot of money, and number two, save a lot of lives. And finally, we can target patients in remission. So what that means is anyone who's treated with cancer, we can never say they're cured because there's always a chance of it coming back. But once they're treated, we usually say that they're in remission. And because these tests, because things like blood tests and liquid biopsies are so readily available and minimally invasive, we're able to very frequently monitor these patients. And the more frequently we're able to monitor these patients, the earlier we can potentially detect recurrences in cancer and the earlier we're able to treat it. Because cancers are a bit like fighting wildfires. When the fire's small, it's very easy to treat. But when the fire spreads, it spreads very rapidly and it becomes very difficult to control. So moving on to CRISPR gene editing. So the initial part, the whole section that we just spoke about with next generation sequencing was basically about how to read these building blocks of the human beings. Now, the next part, which is CRISPR gene editing, is basically how we can alter the building blocks of the human being. And this is a really exciting part because if we're able to alter the building blocks of the human being, then we're able to change and potentially cure diseases. And what ARK Invest feel is that the gene editing technology is able to benefit not only the medical field, but let me just run through a list of what they feel we can actually potentially target. So drug discovery, animal models, drug development, therapeutics, agriculture, diagnostics, data storage, and material sciences. So that's just shows you the variety of things we can enter in terms of market. And according to the research, the addressable market for CRISPR's gene editing is, in the monogenic disease space could scale to 75 billion annually, with nearly 2 trillion in latent demand from unaddressed populations, as monogenic disease account for only 2% of all genetic diseases. Moving on to living drugs. So this is the third platform. So biologic therapies use materials from living organisms to treat disease. So whilst only 6 living drugs have been approved by the FDA, hundreds are evolving in research and development pipelines, many of them potentially curing diseases. So currently the price points of these gene therapies are almost twice as high as traditional therapies. Now this might sound a bit unethical to charge such high prices for something which is so impactful, but the next graph really shows you why this price point is justified. So if we have a look on the left-hand side first, you can see that the cost of chronic cancer treatments is $158 versus the cost of gene therapies and living drugs, which is significantly higher, it's $424. So that's actually 2.7 times higher than chronic cancer treatments. But if you have a look at the middle graph, you can see that from these therapies, the average life years gained in terms of the chronic cancer treatments is 1.6, whereas the average life years gained for gene therapies and living drugs is actually 4.9, and that's actually a 3 times increase in average life years gained. So if we have a look at the final graph, you can see that it's actually more cost effective. So although the actual cost of the therapy is more, the number of years gained is significantly more, which makes it cheaper, and it makes it 25% cheaper. So this is really interesting. The addressable market for living drugs in oncology could exceed 200 billion annually, as they impact more types of cancer at earlier stages than historically has been the case. Applications could extend well beyond oncology, impacting the longevity of human life materially. And the final platform is bioinformatics. So healthcare data, in fact, any kind of data in any industry, is essential in order to allow for disruption, innovation, and for the company to grow exponentially. Now, with connected and specialized medical devices, patients can contribute longitudinal information on their responses to treatment. And machine learning can enhance the efficiency of research and development as companies monitor clinical studies, determine best practices, and tie underlying biology to health outcomes. And ARK Invest feel that the bioinformatic sector could potentially generate 200 billion by 2024. So that's actually the end of the video. And just to summarize, in terms of genetics, we can see that it's a significantly large market and potentially it can grow exponentially. And ARK Invest have shown us the 4 major platforms they feel are going to disrupt this industry, starting with next generation sequencing, moving on to bioinformatics, and you've also got living drugs, and you've got CRISPR gene editing. So I haven't actually spoken about any specific stocks individually, but I may do that at a later stage. But I just wanted to set the scene a little bit because it is quite a complicated topic, and I just wanted to get my head around it personally and also share my thoughts with you. I hope you found the video useful. If you enjoyed it, I'll be grateful if you can like and subscribe, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. If you found it useful in any way, I'll be grateful if you can share this video. Thank you.